Okay, we are live, but we're going to give it a couple of seconds because we told everyone we would start at 5 o'clock. And just to give them an opportunity to get onto the computers to be able to, or their smartphones to be able to watch us, and to give them a little time to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
Mhm. So far, it says we have about 5 people watching.
Hi,
I don't know,
everyone.
but yeah, it's always nice when I see this eye and it tells me a number. It's like, oh, I feel like the host for the day. Okay. So, welcome, Laura. And I want to thank everyone in the community for joining the Amherst Pelham Regional Schools and the Fort River community for our second of 4 community forums. We have asked staff and caregivers to send us questions that they would like to have answered by all the principal candidates. And in addition to those questions that were sent in by the community, I also added some questions that you may find familiar that was in your interview. So you will have an hour and 30 minutes to respond to the 14 questions. I kind of added 2 more, just giving you an opportunity to repeat yourself and your qualifications as we go further into the session for those who get on the call later. And then another just brief, anything more that you'd like us to know opportunities. So it really comes up to about 16 questions or 16 opportunities to speak to the community. And so you have an hour and a half to do that with those 16 questions and points. And just want to make sure that you are ready.
Absolutely. I'm ready to go. So thank you.
All right. So yesterday I made sure that we had the candidate had their water bottle. I hope you have your water bottle next to you because
at the ready.
It's going to make you want to stop and take a stretch.
I'm going to start with some water.
Okay. So to begin, and this is basically part for the course when you're being interviewed or in a session with the community, we'd like you to tell us about yourself, what roles, responsibilities, experiences, and licenses you may have that has prepared you to be the next principal of Fort River Elementary School. So without further ado, Laura, take the stage.
Thank you so much, Doreen, and welcome everyone. I really appreciate you joining me and Doreen and your fellow community members this evening. Buenas tardes to everyone. I'm very, very happy to be here. So I had a few slides that I was going to share, but it's a different platform. I don't really know how to do that. So I'm going to read off a couple of slides over here because I just want to make sure that you get a full picture of who I am, just the same way that I think it's really important in a school that we learn about the whole child. I want you to know me fully and know about me. So who am I? First and foremost, I am a learner. And that is why I am in education. That's why I love schools. And I really appreciate this opportunity to learn about what makes the Fort River Elementary School community unique and vibrant. I have had lots of different school experiences. I got my training as a school leader at Bank Street College of Education. And that really influenced my leadership style. And I will share a lot about that today or this evening. Sorry, day, night. We're on all the time, right? So I have 15 years of experience in public schools in New York City. I am currently an assistant principal at a pre-K through 5th grade school in Sunset Park. I predominantly work with pre-K to 2nd grade teachers, but I do a lot of coaching, math coaching, and specifically this year in the upper grades. And so I'm part of the leadership team, and though my direct supervision is with the younger grades, I interact with all staff members. Prior to being an assistant principal at PS24, I was an instructional coach. I worked at a pre-K through 8th grade school on the Upper West Side, and I worked with teachers in all grade levels in different capacities, social emotional learning, play, We were implementing a new reading and writing curriculum, and also a new math curriculum, as well as developing the social justice program that I'll talk more about later on, I'm sure. Before then, I was a teacher. For the majority of my career, I taught 4th and 5th grade at the neighborhood school in the East Village, and before that, 1st and 2nd grade, and prior to that, 2nd grade at a school in Brooklyn, where I currently live. So that's a little bit about, a little overview of my different learning and teaching and leadership roles. I really see myself as a progressive educator. That's a very core part of my identity. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what that means to be a progressive educator, because language is really important, and what those words mean can mean different things to different people. So when I say a progressive educator, I really center children, and I really think about human-centered experiences in schools. I believe that children bring gifts, passions, and interests, as do all the adults who are in the building, whether it's staff, families. I believe that schools need to be a center for support, and they should be places that are responsive to the people who are part of the school community. And another really integral part of my identity as a progressive educator is that justice and equity and anti-racist practices are really inextricable from schooling. So that's really important in thinking about how we develop children into critically conscious citizens. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself as a parent. I have 2 children. My son is a kindergartner. His name's Benoit. He's been doing remote kindergarten all year. And my daughter, Pascal, she's 4. And she has been doing outdoor preschool all year this year as well. And so, that's a big part of who I am, and thinking about the elementary school experience. And the last thing I wanted to say about myself is that I am a very dedicated community member. I'm a community member here in my neighborhood, in my school where I work. I'm a very active parent. And just like all of you who are joining us here this evening, I think it's really viable to communities to really voice your questions, show up. And so I really appreciate all of you being here today.
Laura,
one last thing. Okay. I could really go on and on, but I'm just I do want to just share a little bit of my my educational stance, because that's also important, and I think reflective in the way that this interview process has gone. I really see schools as being democratic spaces in which everyone's voices are valued, respected, and needed. So I really do appreciate the way that all voices have been included in this process, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about what everybody wants to talk about this evening.
So you mentioned that you live in Brooklyn, and I'm sure that many of the people on the call would probably be wondering, why Amherst? Mm-hmm. You're all the way in New York. Why Amherst? And why would you come here and stay here?
I'm glad that you asked that question. So my family here in Brooklyn, we're all very active in our community, and we've really enjoyed, I grew up in New York, and we've really enjoyed being part of a vibrant community, and we live our lives outwardly. We are, always out in the neighborhood with other families. We're involved with, we know all the local businesses, and we're really ready. And we've been thinking about a move from New York for some time now. And we've been looking. It's been a very big process for us. This is not a COVID time decision. This is something we've been thinking about. I think the last time we were up was in December of 2019. We have some very good friends who are in the Amherst area. And the last time we were there, and we've been there a few times, we really felt like it's a place where that really mirrors a lot of our values, and that mirrors a lot of what we want for our family in terms of community, in terms of culture, in terms of diversity, and in terms of experience. So I'm very excited to be thinking about this and to learn more about why Amherst is such a special place for all of you.
Okay. So question number 2 says, how will your leadership style influence teacher instruction?
So one of the ways that, well, first of all, I think that any partnership in terms of a person who's a school leader or a supervisor hopefully has a positive influence on teacher instruction and practice. That's the number one thing, to have another set of eyes, a partner. As I mentioned, it wasn't so long ago that I was in the classroom. And so I really do think about the experience of teachers and children and families in the classroom. It's not a distant memory. It's very fresh to me. I believe really and truly that I am a teacher of teachers, and I take that role pretty seriously. It's also the thing that brings me a lot of joy in this role. I take an adult development stance when I work with adults. So the same way that as teachers and as parents, we think a lot about child development and how it's really important to know, at each stage, how children are growing. We need to have that same attentiveness to adults. And so taking an adult development stance really considers where different teachers and different staff members are in their learning. Where are they in their careers? Is this a year where teachers are working on a new grade level? Is this a teacher who has, been is a more veteran teacher that has been, part of the fabric of the school for a long time? And so I think really being responsive to where teachers are in their careers and really tapping into what their goals are and helping them to reflect on how and which ways they want to grow. And in order to do all of that, I think that the base for all of that is relationship building. So without having a relationship where you can be vulnerable with one another and really talk about what's going well, what's difficult, and planning next steps, none of that growth can really be possible. So that's really at the core of it all.
Okay. All right, so thank you for that. Question number 3 says, knowing that there is a pandemic and students and staff are just returning to in-person instruction, what is your vision for a fully thriving school committed to equity, social justice, and the social emotional well-being of students and staff?
Yes, it's been a very challenging time. It's been a very challenging time for everyone, and the pandemic has really magnified experiences and challenges that people faced before the pandemic. So I think that it's really crucial to remember that everyone is struggling in different ways, and we need to think about what kinds of supports people need as we move forward. I think moving forward, we're all moving forward, and there's a lot of hope right now, I think, in terms of returning to in-person learning. I've been able to read more about that in terms of your school district, and we've certainly experienced a lot of, we just had our own wave of children come back into the building this week. So it's been a real test in terms of being responsive and really thinking about making those intentional spaces where people can really take a moment to reflect, to grieve, to process what's happening. Things have been ever changing, for over a year now, in ways that we never imagined. And so I think that for the health of a community and for the individuals in that community, it's really essential to prioritize social emotional health, mental health, really checking in with one another about how we're taking care of ourselves. Schools are full of caregivers, and it's really important to recognize the different ways that people have been affected during the pandemic. So continuing to move forward together and always making sure to have those intentional planned times to reflect as we reimagine school together.
Okay. Question number 4 says, and this one should be familiar, it says, at Fort River, we consider all groups to be critical stakeholders in our schools.
Mm-hmm.
How would you work effectively with a diverse group of families and caregivers who may have values that differ from yours?
Mm-hmm.
How would you get input from groups that have not felt included in school decisions in the past?
It's a really important question. And I think that question is related to the prior one in thinking about where those spaces are, where people can feel heard and the ways that they can feel heard. That's something that I've reflected on a lot, what it would look like coming into a community as a new school leader, as a new community member, and having intentional planned listening circles and ways that people can have an opportunity to voice what's been going well, what has worked for them, what hasn't worked for them. That's a very crucial part to the entry plan that I've been thinking about and working on in considering what my first steps would be coming into the Fort River community. I think something else, and I'm trying to slow down a little bit. I'm honestly just feeling a little bit nervous. And I want to make sure that I address everything. So I'm going to slow down just a second and say that, there's that part of the question where you said, how would I think about what voices we're missing, right? Like what voices maybe have felt left out in the community before. And that is my personal responsibility. And that's something that I'm always looking for, not just what are the voices we're hearing, but more importantly, which voices are missing. And there can be lots of reasons why we're not hearing from folks. It could mean, that certain conversations are taking place at times that don't work for people. And there are all different kinds of ways that people want to be involved in community, whether it's being part of parent organizations, whether it's that you're able to drop your child off and pick them up, or whether you're able to be part of a community event. So it's really important to keep a pulse on what are the opportunities for people to participate and be part of school community. And to listen for and look for ways to involve folks who, maybe the current ways that things are happening aren't really like bringing them in. Because I think everybody has something to share. Everybody has talents. Everybody has an investment in their child and in the school. And so we need everybody's input in order to make sure that school is a place that feels responsive to children and to families.
Okay. Do you want to pause for some water or anything?
Yes. I would love to. Thank you.
I know you were saying you were feeling nervous, and sometimes just stopping for the water can relax you a little bit. And don't worry, you're amongst friends here, so
Thanks.
Or hopefully we'll be friends, right? So the next question just goes and says, tell us about a time when you had to make a decision that you knew would be unpopular. What steps did you take prior to making this decision, and how did you handle the pushback, if there was any?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question. There are a lot of decisions that need to be made in schools, and they don't always meet the expectation of what every single person wants. So I have a pretty recent example. So coming into this school year, our school was tasked with figuring out the best sort of model for hybrid instruction, where students would come in for some of the time and they'd be learning from home some of the time, and some children would be learning from home remotely the whole time. And The district and the city provided us with a few different models, some possibilities of what that could look like. The teachers union also provided some input about what teacher responsibilities and roles could look like. And then, of course, parents, we had a lot of parent voice about what worked for our community and what they were hoping from this school year for their children. And so that was a lot to take in and a lot to consider in thinking about maintaining the integrity of our school programs, and also thinking about what our priorities were as a school, and how to keep things really as stable as possible in a really unstable and unsure time. So sort of the first process was taking in all of the information from all the different constituents and from the different levels of information, and of course health and safety and all of that on top of that, which was a major consideration. And what we decided as a leadership team was that a priority for us was that children had the same teachers all year, and that felt really crucial to the support of our children. We had already kept cohorts of children together as they moved up because they had interrupted time in the spring. And so children were already together, and we said to ourselves, well, it feels really important to us that children have a home base. So whether they're at home or in the building, they have this home base, and we really want to make that work. It was really, really hard to do because in all of these different models and all of these different ways, in considering how many people could safely be in a room together, how many children felt like the right amount of children to be in an online classroom, there were a lot of different factors. So what we did was we came up with two, as a leadership team, which includes myself, the other assistant principal, my principal, and then a bunch of different teachers who are also part of our instructional team. We came up with two different models. And one model was closer to one of the models that we had been presented with from the city. And then the other model was a more creative approach, which would allow for teachers and children to stay together, but it required teachers to wear multiple hats and to sometimes be teaching in the classroom, but also be teaching remotely as well. And it was scary. It seemed like there was a lot that would have to be negotiated, and we felt like this was not a decision that we could take lightly. So in terms of our process, we brought in our grade team leaders. So there's a representative from every grade, as well as one of our E&L teachers. And we presented the two models, and we said, here are the two ways that we could go about this, and here are the pros and cons, and what do you all think about this? We had conversations. This is probably mid to late August. Teacher leaders then went back to their teams. They also discussed these models, and they came back to us with more questions and concerns. And ultimately, what we were able to negotiate as a staff was to do this more creative approach, even though the demand would be greater on teachers. We knew it wouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. We couldn't just say, this is going to work in the same way for everyone. But what we did know was that it felt right for the children. We knew that teachers would be teaching in their license areas, and that our programs would remain intact, which felt really important. We weren't going to be pulling anybody to teach something that they weren't qualified to teach. And we were also able to then think about, well, what are the individual supports that teachers might need? And we were able to bring in some substitute teachers or additional support staff for teachers who really felt like, it wasn't going to work for them to be wearing these multiple hats. So that's something that definitely was not popular with everyone, but that we've continued to work through. And it wasn't something, it was something that everyone felt invested in terms of the decision making. And it has, especially at this point in the year when now we have many more students who are back in the building. I think that, you know, the children are happy to be back with their same cohorts. For the most part, there's always an exception, right? There's always an exception, but and so we've really like worked hard as a community together to make this work for everyone.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We are at question number 6, and it says, what is your ideal discipline policy, and how would you develop such a policy?
Okay.
And I don't know if this is the point where you're going to revisit that social justice program that you talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, I think I will a bit. Yes. So the first place that, and I think, Doreen, you've probably heard me say this a couple of times, because when the term discipline comes up, I really think about the root of the word discipline, and discipline at its root means to learn, right? And so I do think that in terms of thinking about a policy, it's really thinking about these opportunities for learning and for teaching, in situations where children are, you know, not meeting the expectations, or, you know, sort of following the guidelines of the community agreements or norms. So that's the place where I think that it's important that, you know, having shared expectations and having shared norms within the community are, you know, crucial, that it's a living and breathing and shared philosophy. I did have a chance to look at the PBIS, you know, program that currently is at Fort River, and I looked at the matrix, and I thought about, oh, these are really like elements of like, what does it look like, and what does it sound like or feel like, whether you're on the playground, in the music room, wherever you are, like, what does it mean to be part of our community? And so I think that, you know, a discipline policy is one that really feels like everybody understands it and everybody has a say in it, but also one that is responsive to the individuals, because I'm going to go back to that thing of there's no one size fits all. And so it really needs to be a policy that's responsive to individual needs. I think that, you know, as individual people, and especially as our younger learners, really have different challenges at times, or different needs that they're faced with. And so we can't have a policy that says, you know, if X, then Y, Z, but really thinking about what is it that individual children need to be able to understand what the conflict was, what their responsibility was in it, to take ownership of that, and to plan next steps together. And all of this, of course, in partnership with families, because I think that school is really an extension of home. And so the more that we can have those home to school connections, the more that we understand that, like, the way that we move throughout the world, it's not something where like you enter school and you have to be one way and you're at home and you have to be another way. You bring your whole self to school. We bring our whole selves, you know, wherever we go. And so really understanding that, you know, our needs are going to look a little bit different. I don't think I'm getting to the social justice part in this question, but, you know, I think the overlap maybe is being responsive to individual children and to the way that different children bring themselves to school, right? Mm-hmm. So that to me feels like a culturally sustaining and responsive practice, to say that, like, okay, who's part of the community, and how do we understand how we operate in school and in the world, and really take our cues from that, as opposed to it being a discipline policy that feels like a monolith, that feels very apart from, that's part of the institution and not part of the individuals.
Right. And the only reason I brought up back that social justice program is because you mentioned it with question number 1, and you said we'll revisit it later. So I didn't know if you wanted to revisit it now, but.
Well, I didn't even get to some of what I wanted to say in my introduction, so I was going to weave it in at some other point. Okay. So I figured that I would be able to come back to that in terms of the work that I do every day as a school leader.
Okay. All right. So that was question number 6. Let's go down to question number 7, which says, can you give a specific example of action steps you have taken to implement restorative practices in your current role or in your prior schools?
Okay. Sure. So in terms of restorative practices, so as a classroom teacher, that was definitely something that was part of my work, especially when I worked in upper elementary school classrooms as a teacher and also as an instructional coach. So I guess that this must have been about like 5 or 6 years ago when I was first thinking about restorative circles and practices and how those could be opportunities for really developing, better sort of strategies for conflict resolution and community building in the classroom. So at that time, I was working in an ICT classroom with an integrated co-teaching model. So in the classroom, there were children with IEPs, and there were children who did not have IEPs, but everybody who had different kinds of needs. And my co-teacher and I, she was the special education teacher, we really were seeing a need coming from the group for specific processes and ways for us to come together and think about some really big questions and some really big questions around race, around identity, around gender that were coming up for the young people in our class. So that's sort of the inception of where it started for me as an educator. But if we sort of fast forward a little bit to where I am now, I would say that restorative, practices really do extend beyond the classroom and are really a place for us to think about how people in a school work together. So more currently, I would say that the restorative practices that I engage in are really more adult-based at this point, like thinking about, and I think part of this has been really in response to the pandemic, thinking about ways that this sort of, comes back to that idea of spaces and intentional places where we can process what's going on. Recently we had a staff meeting around crisis response, and crisis response can look very different if you're in the classroom versus in an online classroom. And crisis intervention can look very different if you have a child who's in the classroom a couple of days and not. So we really wanted to expand our thinking around crisis intervention and really brought it back to thinking about ourselves and ourselves as educators and how we bring ourselves into the school. What are the ways that we're in touch with, how we're feeling, what our triggers are, what might be going on for us in our own families. And so we're in a better place to really help children to regulate and to think about preventative sort of ways that we can work with children so that we don't get to the point of crisis, right? Those circles have been monthly circles that we've done during staff meetings, and it's all, over Zoom or in this kind of format. So we've had to be very creative in thinking about, what are the ways that we really hold to that idea that everybody is able to participate, that there are ways that everyone feels safe in participating and no one feels put on the spot, that we share the mic, unlike what I'm doing tonight, right? But like how we get all voices in, and how we, we continue to hold that space as we have to continue moving on with all the other demands and things that are happening around us.
Okay. And so the next one just adds on. It says, how ready and equipped are you to address issues of racial justice? Please provide examples of how you engaged with this type of work.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I recognize this question from the interview, I think, as well. And I spent a long time on it during the interview, and so I hope I have time to spend on this as well. So how ready am I? So I think that there's a couple of different ways that I need to approach this question. One is personally and one is professionally. I am someone who identifies as being biracial. I am Black and I am white, and I have had, my own experiences growing up where, I confronted issues around race and around equity and in my own family. And so I think that that's important to state because sometimes when these questions get asked, it can feel like we get pushed to talk about where things started professionally, but I wanted to start on that personal note. In terms of my work in this way, in school communities, I really started this, I guess when I was back when I was at Bank Street and I was doing my action research, and at that time I was teaching. I was doing a lot of different teacher leader roles. I was doing my administrative internship. I was sort of all over the place in my school, and I was really interested in the experience of children of color in the school. And that led me to this question around race and if we were a school that talked about race. And so that was now, I guess that was back in like 2011 or 2012. And so that sort of core question has really guided me as I've been in different contexts and in different spaces in my leadership work after I left the classroom and up to present. So when I was in the classroom and at the neighborhood school, I was part of the diversity committee, which was made up of parents and of teachers. And we were able to really, I guess the best way to put it is my research was a place where I was able to start planting seeds and to think about, where are the places that we can start having some more focused conversations and some real honest conversations about the way that race is operating in our school. And we were able to bring in an organization and partner with, at the time they were called Border Crossers, now they're called the Center for Racial Justice in Schools. I think I got that. The Center for Racial Justice in Schools. And so it was a real partnership between the PTA and the staff in coming together around different trainings and workshops that were very responsive to, for instance, one issue that came to light was that there was a real inequity in the way that some of the parent organizations were running, that a lot of parents felt like a lot of the focus was on fundraising, and other people felt like, well, is my time and my commitment not appreciated because I come in and I volunteer and I'm, making costumes and I'm helping with bulletin boards, but like, how do we, how do we really like think about what the culture is of these groups? And so that was a school that I was a part of for a long time. I was sort of a long-standing community member. And then when I left the neighborhood school and I was a new community member at the Riverside School for Makers and Artists, they also, were thinking about like race and the school and issues that were coming to light. But I was a very different person in that context. I wasn't a classroom teacher. I was a coach. I was working with school leadership. And so in that context, I was able to work with a committee of teachers to write and apply for a grant that we were awarded. I think we were one of 9 schools that was awarded a year-long grant, again, with the Center for Racial Justice in Schools to work with the school. And so, there were different kinds of things that were coming up at that school than there had been at the neighborhood school, but there was clearly a need for facilitation around these types of conversations. And so, in my current context now, these conversations are really like part of the everyday work that I do. It's not something that feels like an add-on. It's not like a separate committee. It's really just, it's part of the work and it's really at the forefront. And And the way that, I guess, in formalized ways that I'm continuing this is through, there's the equity team that is school-based at our school. And we're really thinking about teacher expectations and how that gets translated and communicated with children and families. But then in another way, I'm also involved in district level work, where right now we are working on equity in mathematics and thinking about how there are overlaps in conversations around math instruction and practices, and how that affects our young people. So that's a very brief version, but I think in the current work that I'm doing, it really does bring together more ideas, more school leaders in partnership with teachers in every school. So I'm partnering with a third grade teacher at my school. She's looking specifically at practices in her classroom. I'm taking a wider lens, and I'm thinking about language and the kind of language that we use to describe children. And currently I'm informed by the book School Talk, which was written by Mika Pollack, who wrote Everyday Anti-Racism, which came out a few years ago. Or a few years back, I should say. And so I hope that gives like a snapshot of both sort of like my professional journey in this work, but also gives a flavor for the way that it's really just at the heart of what I do every day. I hope we have time for other questions.
We surely do. We have quite a bit of time.
Okay, I'm
So
glad.
question number 9 says, speak to the importance of art, music, physical ed, tech, and library instruction in our students' education and in our school community.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that that is a question, because it really does show that it's those are valued parts of school at Fort River, and I think that the more that we can help children to make connections, and the more that school can be integrated as opposed to cut into different sort of periods or subjects, the more that children are able to make meaning of the world. So I think, in all of those different ways, I think that the more that we can partner together as educators and think about where are these overlaps, if there's a unit of study, that is about, let me think of, if we're studying like rivers, for instance, that's a big unit of study in third grade at a school that I worked at. So if that's the topic, then how are we incorporating the arts? How are we thinking about research? And how do we use the library as a hub for information? And how is library not just a place for books, but really a place, a meeting place for all of these different ways that we access the world? Thinking about, how science plays into that, thinking about, how we, physical education, you can think about like moving, fishing, swimming, like all of those different ways. And then of course music, I can't think of anything more lyrical than nature. So I think that really thinking about how these are not like specials, or that these are places where children go to do very different kinds of things. Like, how do we bring all of these resources together so that children can really see the interconnectedness of it all? Because I think that really sparks a lot of curiosity for children and really helps to engage children in ways and in different ways, using different modalities.
Do you want to pause for a water break or anything?
Yes. All this talk of rivers and swimming, I was thinking.
Well, we're also at question number 10, and we've only been on for about 43 minutes, so we have time. Okay.
I'll slow down a little bit. Good reminder.
So question number 10, this one should also be familiar. It says at Fort River, we have 3 distinct programs, the Caminantes, which is our dual language program. We have AIMS, which is a specialized program for students who with the high functioning autism spectrum disorder. There's Building Blocks, which is a specialized therapeutic program for students with emotional disabilities. And it says, can you please discuss your experiences with each of these populations?
Sure. Yes. So I think it's really exciting that Fort River is a place with the opportunity for children to both be together in one campus and one school, and also to get individualized support and individualized learning and individualized instruction. So my experience with each. So at my current school, we do have a dual language program. So we have dual language classes in pre-K through fifth grade. And I will say that I'm not an expert. I always want to be honest. I came to the school and have learned a great deal. I've learned a lot about the different models. I've learned about roller coaster models side by side. We've looked at best practices. We visited other schools and thought about different language color coding and thought about different ways that we can ensure that we as a school are taking in the latest sort of research and the latest sort of practices to help strengthen our dual language program. The dual language program has been part of the school for a long time, but it's been evolving, and it's changed as leadership at the school has changed. So that's definitely a place where I have growing experience. And I think that it's a place where it feels like it's something that's very important to the Fort River community. I have, been able to do some research to see about the inception of the program, and it seemed like there was a really big need for it and a lot of enthusiasm behind it. So it's really great to see that so many people are invested in the program and seeing it grow. So that's really an important thing in terms of the identity of the school. The Ames program it feels similar, though not no two programs are the same. But also at my school, we do have a program called the Horizon program, which is for children who are on the autism spectrum. It's an 8-to-1-to-1 program, and I think what you said was the Ames program is for
it says for students who have high functioning autism spectrum disorder.
Okay. So our program is not necessarily high functioning. It sort of varies sort of on the spectrum. But what I have learned, so our Horizon program, we're going to be starting our third year. So we have 2 cohorts of children. We've been growing the program from kindergarten, and I've learned a great deal. I've worked with children on the autism spectrum before, but I have not ever been a specialized teacher in that program. But I've learned a lot. We've partnered with both. The program is in partnership with NYU. And so there's a lot of learning that goes along with it. I've done a lot of coursework, ABA training. We've thought about ways that I think we went from thinking about having a program at our school to thinking about how is this our program and how do we make this really a part of the PS24 fabric. And so the thing that I think the place where I am right now in it is thinking about how each child is different and each cohort can feel very different as well. So how do we think about staffing? How do we think about responses to parents? How do we think about the kinds of supports that people need? Especially thinking about incoming kindergartners, where for many of our students, it's their first, school experience. So we've been able to put some really good structures in place, especially as we're growing to second grade next year. We've trained some internal staff, so we haven't brought in external people, but really growing it from within. And right now we're at the point of registration and all of that. So really thinking about as people are coming in, what do they need to know so that they feel part of our school family? And then within the school, even with all the constraints that we have right now in terms of social distancing and all of that, what are the ways that we are integrating, and having moments, I'm losing the world. Hang on. What are the opportunities for inclusion? That's what I was looking for inclusion, so that, we saw that actually we were able to prioritize our Horizon program so that children came in. They've been coming in 5 days a week, and they've had a lot of experiences together, both in their own classrooms. But now at this point of the year with more children and the weather getting so nice, we are now at the point where we're thinking about, okay, what are the ways that children need to, want to be part of, recess or lunch or being outside together. So it's really been a really nice evolution to be a part of. I could talk about that for a while, but I want to make sure that I get to all three programs. And the third program the third district program is the Building Blocks program. And again, as an educator, I've had individual experiences with children who have been in my classroom and then, have benefited from being in therapeutic or more therapeutic environments. And I think what has always sort of been a shame in that is that children were then they weren't able to be part of the schools where I was. They always had to go to a separate program or to a separate kind of school. And so it's really inspiring to me to think about having a built-up program like this that's part of the school. I have had personally, as a school leader, training in TCIS training through Cornell. It's therapeutic intervention in schools. And that was something that came out of a need within our school last year. We had we had a kindergarten cohort of an ICT classroom. So special education teacher, general education teacher, students coming in, children coming in kindergarten. And, as children come into school, some children have challenges that haven't yet been identified as challenges, or, maybe some new sort of challenges present themselves once they're in an elementary school setting. And so we really thought a lot about what the children were saying that they needed and what kind of supports teachers and paraprofessionals and office staff, like what people needed to be able to support children in school. And so we really sought out the TCIS training, and a team of us went, and we were trained in thinking about de-escalating situations and thinking about ways that that we could continue to build in programs in the school that anticipated these kinds of needs. So again, felt more proactive rather than reactive. So that's a little bit, I think it's really heartening to hear about these three programs and to really think about just sort of the parallel or the mirrored experiences that I've had with children and families that have been in similar programs such as these. So it's exciting to think about.
So we just talked about the Caminantes program for a second, and the next question goes further into it. It says, Caminantes is the dual language program in Fort River. How will you support the mission, staff, family, and curriculum of this program and serve as an ambassador of the program in the larger community?
Absolutely. So I remembered this question from the interview, and I did have an opportunity to look up the mission of the program, and I was really inspired, and it gave me a lot to think about the similarities between the mission of the program and the mission of the Fort River school community and all of the overlaps that were there. So thinking about words like how it should be a nurturing place, and how ways that we want to prepare children to be global citizens and be part of the world. And so I think that thinking about the ways that the program lives within the school, all the things that are similar in the way that, what we want for children in the dual language program is the same as what we want for children in all of the programs. And then thinking about what's unique about the program as well. And so I think those curricular questions are particularly important. I'm someone that thinks a lot about curriculum and pedagogy. That's really, a lot of my experience is in curriculum development. And so, at my current school, we had to make a lot of decisions this year about how we were going to continue to meet the needs of children in these different contexts. And we, a really critical piece of our decision making was around our dual language program because, there are a lot of really great curriculums out there, but then the workload falls to teachers and falls to staff to do a lot of translating or to find a lot of the materials. And there's a lot of work that gets additional work, additional pressure that gets put on just a smaller kind of subset of our school. And so, I think that keeping in mind like what's good for the school and what's good for the dual language program, that's really crucial in decision making. So we actually decided to adopt the expeditionary learning curriculum because of all the really rich resources that already existed, in Spanish, and all these different, amazing kind of opportunities that the children could engage in from the get-go, where we didn't have to, do a lot of this sort of back work and leg work on our own. So I think that, so in that way, I think there are ways that like the priorities of a dual language program then inform the priorities of the school. I think there's a back and forth in that. And then that question of being an ambassador, I think that it really does, it really is important to think about like where the program came from. Again, I touched on that a little bit, and like where this need came from. And I would really want to hear from the families and from the teachers who were part of the creation of the program, because that would really inform me in thinking about how are we engaging in the greater community? How are we engaging with other schools that have dual language programs? What are the desires of families who are in the program who are Spanish dominant families? What are the priorities of families that, are learning Spanish as a second language? I'm not a Spanish speaker, but I am an advocate of dual language programs. My daughter is in a French immersion program. I speak French to my children at home because I'm of Haitian descent. And so I really believe in, all that dual language programs can offer children in becoming both biliterate and also just, all of those really amazing things that happen in the way that we problem solve and the way that our brains work when we're able to think and be in two different languages. So that's a little bit of what I bring to it, and I would want to know a lot more. And hopefully I wouldn't be the only ambassador, because I think that it's good to have people who hold the institutional knowledge of the place and who hold the history to be able to speak to that as well, to continue that thread.
Mm-hmm. And let me see, at this point, we have a little more who have joined us than when you first started. So we can take the moment and go back to that first question again for you
Absolutely.
to tell us about yourself and what roles, responsibilities, experiences, and licenses you hold that helps you to be the next, or prepare to be the next principal at that school.
Sure. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad that you joined us. It's okay that you had to join a little bit late. We're all being asked to be in a lot of different places simultaneously right now. So thank you for being here this evening. Buenas tardes. I'm very happy you're here. I shared a little bit about who I am, and I hope to give a fuller picture of who I am, because as important as it is as educators for us to know the whole child, I want you to know me as a whole person. So I'm reading off of a slide, which I was hoping to share with you all, but it'll help keep me on track so that I don't forget anything to share with you. First and foremost, I am a learner. I am someone who is very excited about school and being in school and learning about the unique priorities of the Fort River community. I have 15 years of experience as an educator. Currently, I'm an assistant principal at a pre-K to 5th grade school in Sunset Park in Brooklyn. Prior to that, I was an instructional coach on the Upper West Side at a pre-K through 8th grade school, and I worked with teachers in all aspects of curriculum. And before that, I was a 4th and 5th grade teacher and a 1st and 2nd grade teacher, and before that, a 2nd grade teacher at 2 different elementary schools, one in the East Village in Manhattan and one in Brooklyn. So That's a somewhat shorter version of what I said at the beginning, but I hope it gives an idea of the different roles that I've played as an educator. I do identify as a progressive educator, and it's important for me to tell you a little bit about my philosophy because it really does drive my decision making, and it says a lot about my stance as an educator. I really believe that schools are human-centered places where we need to think about what's developmentally appropriate for children and also what is developmentally responsive to the adults and all of the learners in the building. I think we can't just focus on the children. We're all learners and we're all coming to school with different strengths and with different needs. I take an adult development stance, so that comes from that in terms of my leadership. And I really believe in the unique talents and the capabilities of people in schools. And social justice and equity work is really inextricable from all of that. It's not an add-on. It's not a separate sort of thing that we need to address on the side. It's really part of what it means to be responsive, both culturally in culturally sustaining ways and also in individually responsive ways. So that really anchors the way that I interact with people in the world, I would say. I was going to say in school, but that's really just who I am. I am also a parent, and that's, that also is a big part of my identity. I can't just wear my parent hat or my teacher hat or my school leader hat. I wear them all at the same time. I have 2 children. My son, Benoit, has been doing remote kindergarten all year. He's 6 years old. And my daughter, Pascale, she's 4 years old, and she has been doing outdoor preschool at a French immersion progressive preschool. So she's been out in the park nearly all year. I'm also a very involved community member. And I was saying that, for everyone joining tonight, I'm like all of you, very active. I want to know what's going on. I want to ask all the questions. I want my voice to be heard, and I want to hear the voices of others. I'm an active community member in my own school, in my own neighborhood, and also in my children's schools. I'm actually the class parent of my son's class. I don't know how that happened, but it's been great. And it's been really nice to be able to connect with other families, even though we've been in this remote environment. And I've also been, I guess, more like a thought partner for my daughter's preschool, especially as they decided to pivot and change their whole model to outdoor school so that it was really, in terms of safety and in terms of the philosophy of the school, that was the best move for the school. So we really have been, I've really sort of seen it from both angles. Again, they're my 3 hats all at once in everything that I do. So, So I think, what else did I want that, I think it's also important to just state what my educational stance is for schools, because that also I think is reflected in this interview process, and what makes me feel like Fort River is a really good fit for me. I really do believe that schools are democratic spaces where all voices should be valued and heard, and where all voices are needed. So I'm really deeply appreciative of all of your questions, and I'm happy to hear them because it tells me a little bit about you, and it helps me to share about myself. So thank you so much. And I'm really happy for a reintroduction. So thanks for that opportunity to do that.
Every time I ask that question or go back to that question during the interview process, I always say, they're going to watch it on YouTube later on anyway, so they can always rewind and hear, but I still ask it anyway. Okay, so anyway, question number 12. It says, what thoughts or ideas do you have for bringing a sense of joy, compassion, love, and unity into Fort River Elementary School at the student level, staff level, and for the whole school?
That's great. Ideas. So many ideas. So I think where I would want to start, and then I'll address the question, is I would want to know what is currently bringing joy to the community, and what I have a deep respect for places and histories, and so I think it's important to know, like, what are the traditions, what are the ongoing experiences, so that all continues to be part of the school. And so, there was one parent who shared with me about ways that her daughter created these hearts and brought them to the school and made them for everyone in the school, and that really stuck with me in terms of a story. And I was like, what a great idea! That's not my idea. That's an idea that came from a first grader. And so, I think that that when we cultivate joy, it's something that we do together as a community. And I think that, ways that we cultivate love and cultivate joy are really through shared opportunities for making and doing together. And there's tons of opportunities for that in a classroom, but what are the ways that we can be intentional in thinking about that, so we can continue to get to know each other and to learn about each other in new ways? So I think, a big part of my philosophy and teaching is that curriculum is what happens when people and materials meet. It's not something that comes out of a book. We can be influenced by ideas, but it's really about making and doing. And so, a concrete idea that I have about ways that we could continue to cultivate joy at Fort River is to have experiences, to have project time or work time together. And so I'm thinking about those three different levels, Doreen, that you said: the student level, the staff level, and as a school. And so one way, again, always having to keep in mind the current context, right? So what are the ways that we can be together in community safely? Because we want to be together, right? We want to be together. We've been apart for a long time. But what are the ways that we can do that? And so, I've been thinking about the beautiful area around Fort River Elementary and all of the ways that the outdoors can be a place for making and doing together, opportunities for play, opportunities for gardening, opportunities for creating. And those could be, when I was a teacher, we had a dedicated project time that was part of the curriculum, where students had opportunities to work with different materials that sometimes were very linked to what we were doing in the curriculum. And at other times, they were very independent projects that children wanted to explore on their own. And so I think that having project time or a work time where children can have those opportunities individually, in partners, across classes, hopefully, and having the outdoor space to do that, that's a really beautiful way to, to make and do and be together. And then just to sort of like think about it in terms of concentric circles, thinking about ways that families could come in and lend their expertise. I'm not a woodworker, but there are plenty of people who are very handy and who, have different things that they want to bring. I really am, I'm a very beginner knitter, and I was noticing during the last round of interview that there was somebody knitting, and I almost wanted to say to her, like, oh, what are you making? Because like, that's something that's really inspiring to me. And I think that that's something that those are ways that we can share with each other about ourselves and about our cultures and about our backgrounds. And so thinking about places where parents could come in, it seems like there are already structures for families to come in from what I read in the handbook, opportunities for families to come in for visits. But maybe even thinking about community days or, community project days where there would be, again, these ways that we could be together safely. And then I think from a staff level, there's a different kind of intimacy there. I think there's certainly, it sounds like there's certainly staff members who are also parents. So there's a lot of crossover in that. You can't, again, just wear the one hat. But I think in terms of staff, thinking about ways that staff members are able to share with one another about, what's going on in their classrooms, opportunities to really like celebrate the wins and celebrate what's going well and to problem solve around things that feel trickier. I was really happy to hear that there are a lot of structures for collaboration that are already in place at the school. And so thinking about really like building on that solid foundation and what are the other kinds of opportunities and ways that people could continue to have, cross cross-grade sort of connections in school, and then also all of those ways that maybe teachers can connect outside of school. I guess I'll just throw one more idea out there. A way that I think that like as educators, we're always like sort of on the move, right? Because there's a lot to manage, there's a lot to do, and so again, thinking of intentional spaces, one thing I've been involved in before is staff retreats where we have decided, and it's not like a spa day, unfortunately, which sounds really lovely, but a staff retreat is really thinking about a time where everyone in the community can come together around an idea that's coming up for the school. Next year will be a moment of transition, and it will be a long transition, right? Like it takes time with all the things that are changing. And with kids coming back now and with new leadership in the fall. So, where are the places where maybe a staff retreat could offer, whether it's an afternoon or, a weekend morning, just ways to come together as a community to be together and to, have some opportunities for shared visioning and for sharing of ideas and sharing of ourselves in ways that, that go beyond like the classroom and the hallways.
Thank you. Question number 13 says, how would you support Fort River staff to demonstrate their expertise?
Well, I feel like that really does go hand in hand with thinking about cultivating joy and compassion and togetherness. So I really do feel very strongly about schools being democratic spaces where all voices are included, and also I believe in distributive leadership. And so I think really the way that I see myself as a leader is a facilitator, and somebody who really helps others to see all that's possible in themselves. I always come in and say, I'm not an expert. I have experiences, I have ideas. I get really excited about things like staff retreats, but like maybe that's not what other people are excited about either. And that's okay, right? I think that in order to demonstrate your expertise, you have to have someone who gives you opportunities to do so, where you have that platform, where you have those opportunities. This is this amount of time talking is not something that I'm used to doing. I am much more comfortable and I'm much more, because my style is more facilitating, hearing voices, pulling together those threads, echoing back what I'm hearing, and trying to, echo something back or move the conversation forward from what I hear coming from the group. And so, I've heard, I think that the adjective that was used was that the staff is exceptional at Fort River. And so I have no doubt that there's a lot of expertise and that people, have been at the school for, there's a lot of experience at the school as well, as parents, as teachers. Some people, I think there were some people who said that even their partners had gone to Fort River as children. And so there's a lot to tap into there. And that's something that I'm really seeking out in terms of this next move, is really being in a community where we're doing the work together. Where, it's fine if we need to move the rock up the hill, as long as we're pushing that rock up together. Whatever that is, I really do feel like we can work together in partnership and really inspire one another and push each other and be critical of each other, because, I think that there are places where there's a lot of support, but there's not a lot of sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? People build each other up, but they're afraid to really help each other grow by being critical friends for one another. And so I think that is really important, being able to recognize all the ways that we're experts, and also really being able to recognize all the ways in which we need to grow and how we're going to support each other to be able to do that. So I tend to say that when people come with questions, answers are overrated. But there are lots of questions that we can think about together and that we can work on together in moving the school forward as a team.
Okay. So the next question says, what is something you have done that you are especially proud of? And it does not have to be work related.
That's a nice question to be asked. Something that I feel especially proud of. So it's been a very difficult year. There's been a lot that the pandemic has brought to light for myself, for people as individuals, and for parents, right? I just a couple of days ago, I was listening to an episode of The Daily, which is the New York Times podcast, and it was about pandemic parenting. And I was going for a run, and I was listening, and it's always like the right amount of time because it's like 25 minutes. So I can always time my run like with that podcast. And I was listening to all of these voices of parents, and I burst into tears as I was listening, because there has just been so much that has happened this year for children, for parents who are educators. And so I feel really proud of me, but I really feel proud of us in making every day just moving forward and making every day happen. It could be very small wins, but I think that we really do need to recognize all of the ways that pandemic parenting has been difficult for families, and the ways that children have just continued to grow and be resilient in all of this. I look at my own children and the ways that they've adapted and the ways that they're mirroring back for me, the feelings that I'm having and the way that I'm mirroring back for them, things that are going on for them. And so it's really taught me a lot about myself, and it's really opened up a lot of possibility. I'm really deeply appreciative of this interview process and how I've been able to reflect, and it's given me space to do some really exciting imagining, to really think forward in a time where a lot has been reactive, or a lot has been about safety, and it continues to be, but having that space to be vulnerable and really start to think about the future has been really energizing for me. And so I'm really, really grateful for that. And I think the last thing I would say about that is that this year has taught me a lot about what leadership looks like. I have had a few conversations recently, not at work, but with people in my life who have thanked me for my leadership, and it has really expanded my thinking of the different ways that I show leadership. So with different family members who've had to make decisions, difficult decisions about, whether or not to sell their home, whether or not to, make these really big kind of decisions. And without any prompting, several different people have thanked me for my leadership, and it has made me realize that really my strength is being able to understand what people care about and really help them to meet their goals, however that looks, and to keep checking in with them, to help them reflect, and to keep going. And so I'm thankful for the time that you've all given me to be able to reflect and to think about, how I'm going to be moving forward as well in these next steps in my career, and hopefully with all of you. So thank you.
Nice. And the last one says, is there anything else that you'd like us to know about you?
Well, I guess I would just come back to your question, Doreen, about, how I'm in Brooklyn right now, and I'm really excited about this move to Amherst. And so for anybody who wasn't on the call earlier, I just want to reiterate that like I really am very excited about all of the possibilities that the Amherst community could bring, for myself, for my family, for my children. And I just see so many parallels between what I value in community and, some of what I've learned about the Fort River community as well. And so I am very excited to learn more, and I welcome all the tips, and I welcome all the insider information about the Amherst area, because it really does feel like a place where I can bring my whole self in terms of being an educator, being a school leader, and a parent and a community member. So thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us. And we are excited that we've had an opportunity to hear about you and your experiences. And, it is 6:19, so we're a little shy of our time. And, it's okay for us to end now.
I always think the gift of time is always nice too, right? I was saying to you earlier, maybe people need to feed their kids or feed themselves, or go for a walk, take a breath,
and unwind.
Yes, take a beat. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, and you take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a really restful night. Thank you, Doreen. I appreciate everything you've done. Thanks.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.